Hey, folks, welcome to another episode of Leader Talk. My name is SEAC retired John Wayne Troxell, former senior enlisted advisor to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, now retired, but still getting out and doing things to pay it forward to the current folks in the military, give back to my fellow veterans, and enjoy my life with my family. Sorry we haven't taped an episode lately, but I've been on the road a lot. I was in Europe, and I was down in San Diego with some Marines and sailors, and I just returned from the Association of the United States Army Land Pack Conference in Hawaii before I take off on Sunday and head to Fort Liberty, North Carolina. But it's good to be here and get after another episode today. The topic of today's episode is consequences. Generally, everybody knows what the word consequences mean. You know, it's a result or an effect of an action or a condition, or it may be something of importance or relevance. But it seems like in today's world that we have a lack of consequences for people's actions. You know, it used to be you break the law, you go to jail. If you break a rule at work and you consistently do that, you get fired. But it seems to me, in the world we live in now, where we were a world where we celebrated heroism, we celebrated success, we celebrated achievement, now it looks like in this world, we celebrate victimism. And that the higher you can go on the victimism pyramid, the more you're going to be celebrated. And I think that's completely inverse to what our nation and the world is all about. I'll give you an example here. These pro-Palestinian protests. Now, I've spoken extensively about these on previous episodes and my experience with multiple visits into Israel and down by Gaza and the West Bank and other places like that, the Golan Heights. But these pro-Palestinian protests, especially on these college campuses. So you have young men and women who are going to college, which means generally they're not poor, all right? And when you look at Columbia University or Princeton or some of these other universities, these are pretty affluent kids that are going to this school. And all of a sudden they want to start doing these protests on something that they truly and fully don't understand. And then they do actions like setting up a pro-Palestinian camp in the middle of the quad at universities. Some have even barricaded themselves in school facilities, libraries, and everything, and have done some vandalism and things like that. And then you look at Georgetown University, where they absolutely desecrated the statue of George Washington. The lack of those consequences for their actions is going to fuel them to continue with this kind of behavior. But they also got into things like hunger strikes. And as I mentioned, barricading themselves into facilities and not letting law enforcement or anybody else in. And this likens me back to the Chop Chaz zone after the George Floyd murder. The Chop zone was known as the Capitol Hill Autonomous Protest. Then it changed its name because it's not a protest. We're an autonomous zone, so it was Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. But it was an area where these far left radicals decided they were going to take over a 6-block area of Capitol Hill to include the East Precinct Police Station, which was abandoned by law enforcement on behalf of the word from the mayor of Seattle. And all of a sudden they thought, we are going to have this utopia here. But there was no rule of law. There was no law enforcement in there. People could act the way they wanted to, and they could do whatever they wanted to. And pretty soon, because of illicit drugs there, and alcohol, and firearms, with a bunch of people that weren't fully mature enough to understand that something like this is a recipe for a disaster, pretty soon there were violent crimes happening. And then all of a sudden, fueled by drugs and alcohol, they started shooting at each other because of small disagreements. And in the end, 3 teenagers were finally killed. And ultimately, the mayor had to call in law enforcement to finally clear the place out. And you see that now on some of these universities. But some of these folks, they want to be a revolutionary. They want to be this radical activist. because the consequences aren't there to hold them accountable for their actions, but they're only going about it halfway. And one thing, that will always be hard is if you live a privileged life and you attend a very affluent university, and all of a sudden you want to be this revolutionary that says, I'm going to go on a hunger strike until Israel or my university stops doing business with Israel, or the United States stops funding Israel, or that Israel concedes and Palestine is a new nation. If you go on a hunger strike and all of a sudden 9 days later you're unhealthy and your body is breaking down on you because you're not nourishing it, and you come out and say, well, we're going to stop our hunger strike because we are ill and all this other stuff. Well, okay, then you ain't in it for the long haul, and you truly do not believe in what you're doing. And for those people that barricaded themselves at Columbia University with all of this stuff in there, and then when people couldn't come in, of authority or anything, and then they chose not to bring them in food, they wanted to complain about the administration, saying, I couldn't believe that they won't allow food or bring us food into our encampment here, that the university doesn't care about its students. Probably the most ludicrous things I've ever heard. But this is what happens when we lessen the consequences, or there's no consequences for radical actions like these right here. So here's the other thing. We've had people that were so enamored and radicalized, young people, and I'm talking teenage girls, about ISIS during the global war on terrorism, that they left home in the United States and they thought they were going to go live in utopia by joining these ISIS organizations. And especially for young ladies, when you show up to a terrorist organization like ISIS, you have just become a sex slave for an ISIS fighter or multiple ISIS fighters. So again, I go back to these young people don't fully understand some of the things that are going on in the world. And for those of us that have served in combat and have faced the likes of ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and the others that are similar to Hamas and these other terrorist organizations, and we have seen firsthand the kind of carnage, brutality, and unforgiveness that they will put on non-believers and others outside of who they are, my message is, know what the hell you're doing before you start trying to do something like this. So the bottom line, and my message to all these kids out there that are trying to be radical activists, either you're all in or get your ass back into class and be a model citizen again and do the things to help your own life. And the last thing I'll say on that in this segment, where the hell are the parents? My wife Sandra and I raised 3 boys, and all 3 of my sons are doing quite well in their lives. They have families, they work, and they are model citizens. They haven't been perfect, but in the end, they are exactly what we hope to be. They are a reflection of me and my wife. And when I see parents that allow their kids to go out and go on a hunger strike for 9 days or barricade themselves in a university and piss and moan and whine about something that they're truly not going to have an impact against, I'm thinking to myself, what kind of parenting is this? We've all seen in a grocery store or at a mall or something, a young kid that's running around acting crazy and everything, and the parents aren't doing anything. Their face is buried in their phone, and they're not following what the children are doing and anything. I, John Wayne Troxell, didn't want to be that kind of parent. I wanted my children to be a reflection of me and the values that I upheld, especially through 38 years of service and the ones that I still have today. So parents, get up off your asses and start parenting, teaching, coaching, and mentoring your kids to be honorable people. So we're going to take a quick break here. And when we come back to the next segment, we're going to talk a little bit about a life of honor and living with healthy fear. But first, let's hear from our sponsors at Downrange Supplements.
Downrange Supplements. As the brand of the troops, we produce only the highest quality supplements conducive to mission effectiveness. Whether it's our fully dosed pre-workout, recovery and rehydration, or Mermite protein, it's time to continually improve your fighting position with Downrange Supplements. Go to www.downrangesups.com today and take your training to the next level.
Hey folks, welcome back to Leader Talk. I'm John Wayne Troxell, your host. Today we're talking about consequences. And for this segment here, I'm going to concentrate on living a life of honor and a thing I call healthy fear. So there are consequences for what we do, albeit that some of them have lessened because of some things politically have gone on in our nation that I'll cover in the next segment. But for me, living a life of honor is doing the right thing when nobody is watching. I don't rob banks, not because I fear going to jail, which I do fear going to jail, but more importantly, I am not going to embarrass myself, my spouse, my children, my grandchildren, my entire family, or my friends and other American veterans around the world by executing some behavior that is criminal or is less than honorable. I choose to live an honorable life. Now, I'm not perfect. None of us in this world are perfect, and we're never going to be perfect. But I abide by the rule of law, and there's a healthy fear in me because I don't want to let my family and friends down by having some kind of bad behavior. And I certainly don't want to let myself down. And lastly, I don't want to end up in prison. So I choose to live a life of honor. But living a life of honor now has kind of been on a sliding scale. You go on things like TikTok now, and if somebody puts a video on TikTok where they have been slighted or something as bad has happened to them, they are going to get tens of thousands of viewers, support, and things like that. But if they go on, the same person went on to TikTok and said, hey, I'm getting out, getting after it, I'm having a great life, got a great career going and everything, nobody cares about that now. They want to look for the bad guy. They want to look for the person that is getting after promoting their victimism. And I'll give you an example. I'm not in the military anymore. I don't want to go back into the military, all right? I loved my career. I absolutely love reaching the pinnacle of the enlisted ranks, but my time is over and I have a different role now. But here on social media lately, I've seen people having these barbs about beards in the military uniform. Now, again, I don't have a vote on whether it's right or wrong for males to have facial hair or whatever. There are rules and regulations by the services that are expected to be garnered. But it seems to me we put that on a sliding scale. If someone has a shaving profile and all of a sudden, yes, you can have a beard. And oh, by the way, we are not going to police it, in accordance with the regulation. But the other day, I saw this on social media where this young man that was expected to get a senior level promotion and even went and got his photo for his promotion done with his beard and a haircut that were both borderline on the regulation. And he even went and made a TikTok video where he was denigrating all the haters, as he called it. And look, even with my beard and everything, I'm moving up into this position. And he was cussing and everything. So it wasn't so much the beard or the hairdo, it was his behavior. So in his mind, he thought, I've shown that I can still do this position with a borderline beard and hair. He thought now I can get after some radical behavior that will be okay because I beat the man, all right? Well, because of that video, he ended up not getting that position. And in turn, he went back on social media and in print media and expressed his victimism on why he didn't get it. The bottom line is this American hero, he's a soldier, did not get the job, not because he had a beard and a faddish hairdo. It was because of his behavior on social media, his unprofessional behavior. But again, when you try to play the victim, you're going to get people behind you because the man is out to get you in the military, all right? So healthy fear and a life of honor is what we got to live by. Now, again, I don't have a problem with someone that has a shaving profile or something like that. And again, I don't have skin in the game anymore. So the current force has to figure all of that out. But I know this, that an attribute that all of us need to maintain is selflessness. And think about others before we think of ourselves, and living it through a life of honor and with a associated healthy fear of not letting people down that depend on you to be that person that lives a life of honor has to be more relevant in our nation today than it really is. So anyways, we're going to stop there, take another break, hear from our sponsors, and we'll come back with our final segment where we're going to talk about what happens when you have a lack of consequences and there's not a modification of behavior. So first, let's hear from our sponsors.
How you guys doing? I'm Colton Smith, and I'm announcing right now, Downrange Supplements is in your local commissary. If you're anywhere near a base and you have base access, get to the commissary and check out our pre-workout, our rehydration BCA formula, and our protein. I promise you, you will not be disappointed. It is the best in the market, and Listed 9 Fight Company, my brand, is partnered with Downrange Supplements for a reason, and I tell you, their products work. And also, don't forget, we kill suckers.
Hey folks, welcome back to Leader Talk. SEAC retired John Wayne Troxell here. We're talking consequences. And on this final segment, I want to talk about what happens when you have a lack of consequences. First and foremost, how do we get there where we have a lack of consequences? Well, generally, political narratives will drive this nation into a direction that will push a story or a narrative that will cause a lack of consequences. And under this administration, you've seen the defund the police narrative, soft on crime narrative, where things like shoplifting and things like that aren't necessarily a big deal anymore. And then the open border that we have and how we treat illegals that come into the country between the ports of entry and how we're giving them free cell phones. We're giving them a monthly stipend, but we aren't doing anything to modify their behavior. And when you have things like this, where you have this imbalance for necessary accountability and rule of law and consequences for illegal, immoral, or unethical behavior, all of a sudden it's just going to drive people to do other things. And I call it, what do we do when we have unchecked behavior? When someone is not held accountable for doing something illegal? Well, that behavior will continue and it can become reckless and unsafe. And if it's further unchecked, it can become dangerous. And ultimately, if it is unchecked, it can become deadly. Deadly actions can happen. And you see a lot of things today where people are on a spur of the moment, picking up a gun and shooting somebody else. My hometown back in Davenport, Iowa, I read our newspaper every day. I get it online, and I see all the murders happening back where I come from. And I look at some of the circumstances associated with that. And it was a spur of the moment. Someone picked up a gun and shot someone else. And it's not so much that they were slighted or something like that. It's about a story or a narrative that they want to push. Look at me. I didn't put up with any shit and I killed this guy. Well, that'll be a great story in the yard at Pelican Bay Prison when you're doing life, okay? But the bottom line is this. The more we have unchecked behavior, the more ultimately it could end up in a deadly situation, like the Chop Chaz zone that I mentioned before, or some of these things that are spiraling because of these pro-Palestinian protests and barricades and hunger strikes and everything. So how do we fix that? We got to squash the narrative. We got to squash the story. And it goes back to, we got to support law enforcement. Because I can tell you this, if a cop knows that he doesn't have the backing of the local DA or the chief of police or the mayor, do you think he's going to truly go out and get after the rule of law the way he or she should? When they know that if something bad goes wrong, that they're going to be the perp and the perp is going to be the victim? Absolutely not. It's common sense. It won't happen like that. And do you think that our brave men and women on our border, when they know if they do things to try to rein in illegals and they don't get the support of the Director of Homeland Security or an administration, do you think they're going to continue to go out and do the job necessary? Every one of those folks in law enforcement, in our Customs and Border Patrol, in our military, the one thing they want to do every night is they want to go home to their families. And if that's going to be in jeopardy because of a lack of consequences on criminals and people breaking the law, it's going to drive behavior in a direction that we cannot have. So I end with this. We got to have consequences. There's got to be right and wrong, and it's got to be a clearly defined line. And I think the vast majority of Americans know what that line is. And we got to have leaders at the highest levels that aren't operating on a slippery slope or in a gray area. It either is or is not. And we've got to continue to get after making sure there are consequences when people do things wrong. Now, I'm not saying we throw the book at somebody because they might be smoking marijuana or something like that. But if it's a lawful way to do it and somebody is doing it, fine. But if somebody is doing something that is in an unlawful matter, then we need to give them some consequences. So that's going to end it today. Before we get out of here, though, I want to give my warrior shout out. Last week, as I mentioned, I was in San Diego, California at Marine Corps Recruit Depot, San Diego, at Naval Station, San Diego, got on the USS Carl Vinson, and finished off down there at Camp Pendleton with Marines of 1st Marine Expeditionary Force. And my shout out goes to Sergeant Major Jennifer Bartow. She is the battalion sergeant major of the Marine 3rd Assault Amphibian Battalion. And she hosted me for a smoke and PT session. She allowed me to do a leadership seminar with about 150 of her Marines. And I spent the day with them. And I saw a leader in Sergeant Major Bartow that leads by example, that never does anything or allows her troops to do anything that she wouldn't do herself, and is a leader of character. And she embodies everything that we would want out of someone that is living a life of honor and that has a healthy fear of not wanting to embarrass her family, herself, or her Marines. And so my shout out goes to the first ever female Sergeant Major for the 3rd Amphib Battalion there in 1 MEF. Sergeant Major Jennifer Bartow. Sergeant Major, keep pounding. You represent our nation's finest. And so before we get out of here, let me give a shout out to our sponsors, Downrange Supplements. You can find them at downrangesups.com, on Amazon. And if you're military, in our commissaries, as well as in many grocery store chains like Hy-Vee in the Midwest. Also, don't forget about my book, Surrender or Die, Reflections of a Combat Leader, available on Barnes & Noble and Amazon.com. And last but not least, please tune in every Monday night at 10 o'clock Eastern Time on the History Channel to a new show, The Proof is Out There, Military Mysteries, where yours truly serves as a military analyst for this show. I was on episode 4 last week. Hope to see you as you turn in there. And we hope to see you again when you tune in next time for Leader Talk. Thank you all for the support. God bless you all, and God bless America. Boom.